Hello, hello, creatives. Welcome to True Creativity Within the podcast. This is episode 22, and I'm excited to say that as we are going into April, May will be a year that I'm actually doing this podcast. So that's kind of cool, and I'm excited about that. So I'm looking forward to making the 1 year mark because that's kind of an accomplishment, and we'll see where this goes from there. So in this episode, I want to talk about the importance of providing loving kindness and self-compassion to yourself as a creative, an artist, in your creative life. So I want to ask you this question. When it comes to your creativity, your art making, yourself as an artist, as a creative, do you have a tendency to be hard on yourself? Do you have a tendency to be self-critical, self-judgmental versus actually being more nurturing and more compassionate towards yourself? So that's a really good question to ask, because I think what happens is we have a tendency to take it for granted. And when I mean take it for granted, I mean we're not even thinking about it. We're not even thinking about it. We're habitually in the pattern of criticizing ourselves and looking for what's wrong, looking for what needs improvement, right? And if you find yourself saying, yes, I have a tendency to be self-judging on my artwork or myself, that is not your fault, because I think we are conditioned in the world, and whether that is from our past, being raised in a society that has a tendency to look for the wrong, look for the negative. Our educational system is kind of focused on that as well. So if you feel like that is your pattern and that's your mindset, that is totally because we are in a society, in a world that actually trains us to be that way. Another thing too is I think creatives typically have a tendency to be a little bit harder on themselves and are a little bit more inclined to have some really deep self-criticism, self-doubt, and for various reasons. Number one, we're perfectionists. I know I have a tendency to be a perfectionist when it comes to my creativity, and I've really had to work on that. I really had to work to recognize I'm trying to over perfect it and when I need to pull back. So we have a tendency to be perfectionists. And it's not just we want it perfect, it's because we have this vision or this idea in our head, and we're striving to try to execute that idea, that vision. And when it doesn't perfectly play out, or we're unable to execute it exactly the way we see it in our head, that is a form of perfectionism. And that can lead to being hard on ourselves. Another thing too is that we have this tendency, because creativity, art making, whether it's writing, singing, performing, is a very personal thing to us. So we have this tendency to compare our level, our type of work, how well we're doing to others. And we have that tendency, and that comparison can lead to, gosh, I'm just not good enough, or I wish I was better than that, or I'm never going to be as good as that. So we really need to be aware of that, because comparison can lead to that form of thinking. And also, I think that we depend on sometimes people or the world loving our creations, loving our art, in order for us to feel loved, in order for us to feel valuable and accepted, right? So that's another reason why we have this tendency to be a little hard on ourselves. Art education is often focused around the crits, right? I remember in art school, it was all about the crits. And I remember the crits being anxiety provoking because now we had to show what we created in front of the class to the teacher and hope that it was good enough, right? So, that's one of the things is that because if you have been through art education, if you have been through some formal education, we were trained to look for the things that need improvement, which often came across as not good enough. This is wrong. Maybe change this. And that's why one of the things I always said in my workshops is there's no crits here, because I really believe that it's important to move away from that in order to access that pure creative flow and your own authentic creative expression. So, art education has put that habitual pattern in us. Another thing, too, is our upbringing. A lot of creatives turned to art as a way to escape, as a way to cope with what was going on in their childhood. So if you had an absent parent or an overbearing parent or a critical parent, we turned to that art to either try to get attention or get the love we wanted, the acceptance we wanted from our parents, or if it was a way to cope with traumatic situations. So a lot of creatives have a lot of these ingredients that tend to make them a little bit more susceptible to being hard on themselves and critical of themselves. So I believe creativity comes from love, that there is love in what we create. And I'm going to go a little deeper into that because I think it's important, and maybe we take it for granted, that when we want to create something, we kind of see beyond the fact that this is coming from our soul. That when we're creating something, this is coming from our creative spirit. It's coming from a deep place from us. And in that moment, we're connected to creative spirit. We're connected to something beyond ourselves. So what happens is that creativity is what I believe is directly connected to our heart center. And that creativity is a heart-centered activity. And I mentioned, if you watched or listened to my podcast, my last podcast, I mentioned briefly heart coherence. So just to review, heart coherence is aligning the mind, body, and spirit. And because during a creative process, you are aligning your mind, body, and spirit, that provides and creates a sense of hopefulness, a sense of harmony, that you're in sync with something, that you're aligned with something greater than yourself. It also creates a sense of harmony and wholeness. And because of that, I feel like those emotions are very similar to when we fall in love, or similar to when we feel loved by someone. We feel it gives us a sense of hope about the world, about our life, about ourselves. When we feel loved by someone, we feel like we are reflected back our true essence, our true nature, something positive about ourselves. I think creativity does the same for us. And then also when you think about, if I had to if I had to give a gift, say, for example, my friend's having a birthday and I decide I want to create something for that person. So I create a piece of art versus I go to the mall or the store and I pick something up real quick. The piece of art has a little bit more love in it. Yeah. And trust me, there's nothing wrong with we run out of time, we do have to pick something up. But I feel like when we create something, this is why I love giving my art away, is because there's a little bit of love being put into that piece of art and then given as a gift. So that's an example of how creativity is coming from our heart. So one of the things I wanted to talk about is that creativity is a way to self-soothe. In other words, I think what has happened is, and I know that I did this, as a kid and then throughout my life when I was having difficult times or was going through a breakup, the end of a relationship, I would always return to creativity to just help me cope, to help me self-soothe. And I think that the term self-soothing was really an attempt as a kid, and I know a lot of kids do this, and you might want to even explore how you might have self-soothed as a kid. But I think it was a way to feel loved, and it was a way to nourish ourselves, to nurture ourselves, because maybe we felt alone at some point, or rejected, or abandoned. Maybe we didn't feel like we fit in. So we went to creativity as a way to self-soothe and to give us that love and acceptance, and so we didn't feel so alone, right? So I think that's important to think about in terms of why creativity can be a form of love. Another thing is we also experience heart coherence when we are treating ourselves with loving kindness and self-compassion. So the term loving kindness and self-compassion comes from Buddhist teachings. They believed that it was in order to make a difference in the world, it was important to practice loving kindness and compassion towards others and towards the world. Well, I believe the same goes for ourselves, to be able to provide loving kindness and self-compassion to ourselves. Because, and what is that? Well, that's when instead of going straight to the self-criticism, right, saying unkind things to ourselves, which I believe when we say things, because sometimes we don't even hear or recognize the words that are going on in our head. Like, for example, we're creating something and the words or the dialogue going on in our head is, oh, that's awful. Oh, you're not creative enough. You're no good at this. That to me is unkind things. So I think that it's important to recognize that. And what can we do to be more kind to ourselves, more loving to ourselves? And I think that's why it's important to recognize that and to be able to start to practice being a more loving, more kind, and more compassionate of ourselves as a creative, as well as during the creative process. So treating yourself with loving kindness and self-compassion, I believe, is essential to you as a creative in order to thrive, not only in your creative life, but to thrive in your creativity, in your art practice, in whatever you're pursuing in terms of what you want to create, what medium you want to explore and grow and develop in your artistic journey. I believe it's essential to be able to practice ongoing loving kindness and self-compassion for yourself. So one of the things that I think is that if we're an artist, if we're always relying on someone outside ourselves, always relying on someone to love our art in order for us to feel loved, we're going to end up feeling disappointed. Now, it's important that we have that feeling of love and compassion and unconditional love from our loved ones, our friends, people who are close that we trust. That's important. But if we always rely on the outside world to make us feel confident in ourselves as creative, to make us feel, to boost our self-esteem, we're always going to fall short, because the world doesn't always get us. The world doesn't always get our art. And I think that it's important to remember that we can always return to ourselves to provide that. Plus, if we're always relying on the outside world, it kind of perpetuates the mindset and the belief that we're not worthy, we're not valuable enough, we're not, we're not good at what we're doing. It almost perpetuates and continues that cycle. So that's something to really think about. And so the reason why I wanted to talk about this in this episode is that I have a mini course called Treating Yourself with Loving Kindness and Self-Compassion. And in that course, I take you through a guided visualization to help you experience that loving kindness and compassion and how you can begin to provide that for yourself. I take you through a guided visualization. I also walk you through some self-reflection exercises so you can deepen that understanding of what it means to be more kind to yourself, more loving to yourself. And then I also take that idea and infuse an art practice. So I take you through the step by step through an art practice that will also reflect the exercise and the practice of loving kindness and self-compassion. So in this online course, I also give you some inspirational quotes that you can download and print out and stick in your creative space, your art studio, so that you can be reminded how important it is to be able to provide that for yourself, especially during the creative process. And also included in this mini course is a bonus presentation on seeking to matter, where I talk about the importance of being able to really honor and own your value and worth, as versus striving to find that in getting approval from the outside world or having the world determine your value and worth. It's important for us as creatives to see that first within ourselves so that we can navigate the world a little bit more grounded, a little bit more connected to who we are and our authentic self. So I want to encourage you to check out that mini course, and I also want to make this course available as much as available to as many as possible. So I am offering a 50% discount through the month of April on this course. So that makes the course $19.50. And I think it's important so that all of you, all creatives, I know I struggle with this. I know you guys probably struggle with this. I want to help you guys begin the journey to start practicing that loving kindness and compassion for yourself. So I am putting the coupon code and the link in this description so that you can go check it out and hopefully enroll in the course. Because I really believe that if you take advantage of this, you can begin to develop that mindset and that habit and pattern so that it can help you strive creatively. Because I think this is one of those essential things that it's important for any creative to have, because we have a tendency to lean towards the opposite, right? And we need to kind of deconstruct some of that preconditioning and training that we've had so that we can thrive creatively and thrive as an artist and a creative person. And actually, I want to encourage you to examine that part of yourself to see, do I have a tendency to be more critical, more self-judging, versus loving and compassionate towards myself? Just really think about that and take that seriously. Thank you for listening. Until next time, stay creative. Bye.